There are roads you drive because you have to, and there are roads you drive because you're looking for trouble. Tonight, we're on the second kind. This is Sweet Hollow Road and Mount Misery Road, two narrow strips of asphalt running through the woods in West Hills on Long Island, New York. By day, they're ordinary local back roads. By night, they're the focus of some of the strangest and most persistent urban legends in the state. Ghost lights, phantom police officers, cemeteries, a burned-down hospital that may never have existed, a woman called Mary who somehow seems to be everywhere at once. And like most good legends, they sit on top of just enough real history, real accidents, and real fear to make you wonder where the story ends and the truth begins. Sweet Hollow Road runs north-south through a shallow valley just west of the town of Huntington. To the east is a low ridge of hills. To the west, more woods and scattered houses. Up on the hillside is Mount Misery Road, climbing the ridge in tight bends before dropping back down to the suburban grid. Both roads sit right on the edge of West Hills County Park, a patch of preserved woodland threaded with narrow tracks and old stone walls. It doesn't look like the kind of place you'd find one of Long Island's most famous ghost stories. But ask around, and you'll hear the same two names again and again. Sweet Hollow Road, Mount Misery. Locals will sometimes tell you that even before Europeans arrived, the ridge we now call Mount Misery was considered bad ground. According to legend, the indigenous people of the area saw it as a kind of no man's land, a place of strange lights, missing livestock, and creatures in the woods that didn't quite look like anything they recognized. Whether that's genuine tradition or something added later, it fits the mood. When settlers came, they turned an old indigenous footpath into Old Country Road, running along the base of the hills. To get north, they had to cross the ridge, dragging wagons and supplies up and over steep slopes. One retelling says the climb was so difficult that people simply started calling the place Mount Misery, and the name stuck. Today, it's just a bump on the map. But on dark, wet nights, when fog hangs low between the trees, it doesn't feel like just anything. One of the most famous stories in this area is not about the hills themselves, but about something said to sit on them: an asylum. Depending on who you ask, there was once a small psychiatric hospital or lunatic asylum on or near Mount Misery Road. In some versions, it was built in the 1800s, in others in the early 1900s. The legend usually ends the same way. A patient sets the building on fire. Trapped staff and patients die in the flames. The hospital is quietly demolished, but the ground remembers. People driving the road at night report seeing a building where no building should be, lights in upper windows, and a woman in a hospital gown stepping out into the lane. The problem is, when researchers went looking, they couldn't find records of a psychiatric hospital on Mount Misery that matches the story. There were large institutions elsewhere on Long Island, and it's easy for stories to migrate. But up here in the West Hills, the asylum on the hill appears to be more ghost story than documented fact. That doesn't stop people going looking for it. And it doesn't stop the stories. If there is one figure who ties together Sweet Hollow Road, Mount Misery, and half the legends on Long Island, it's a woman named Mary. Exactly which Mary depends on who you're talking to. Sometimes she's a young woman who jumped or was pushed from a moving car along Sweet Hollow Road after an argument with her boyfriend, only to be hit and killed by another driver. Sometimes she's a hitchhiker, soaking wet, who appears at the roadside and quietly asks for a ride home, only to vanish from the back seat mid-journey. Sometimes she's a patient from that mysterious hospital on Mount Misery, a white lady who died in the fire and now walks the woods, looking for a way out. In one version, you can call her name at a certain grave in Melville Cemetery, just off Sweet Hollow Road, and a figure in white will step out from between the stones. In another, you'll see her on the shoulder of the road near the bridge, waiting for a lover who never returned. What all these stories have in common is simple: a tragic woman, a violent death, and a road where she is still said to wait. Sweet Hollow Road itself is a narrow, partly wooded route with a cemetery, a few historic houses, and an underpass where the Northern State Parkway crosses above. If you park just under that overpass at night, you're standing in the middle of several overlapping legends at once. One version says there was a school bus that lost control above during a snowstorm. It broke through the barrier, plunged off the bridge, and hit the road below, killing the children inside. Now, the story goes, if you stop your car beneath the bridge, put it in neutral, and turn off your lights, child-sized handprints will appear in the dust on your bumper as unseen hands push you out of danger and back up the slight rise. There's no official record of a bus plunging off that bridge. Variations of this legend appear all over the United States. But that hasn't stopped generations of teenagers from coming out here in the middle of the night, turning off their engines, and waiting to see if anything touches the car. Some report nothing but cold, quiet darkness. Others talk about tiny smears and prints on the glass, appearing where there were none before. The bridge has another, much darker story attached to it. In one telling, a group of teenagers hang themselves from the overpass, their bodies swinging above the road. In another, a single boy chose that spot to end his life. If you stop beneath the bridge and flash your headlights, some people say you'll see their silhouettes hanging in the air for just a moment before they fade. Again, there's no solid documentation for a mass hanging at this exact location, but the story persists. When you mix a narrow road, a blind concrete underpass, local grief over various real accidents in the area, and a steady stream of late-night dare seekers, it isn't hard to see how whispers could grow into something much bigger. And then there is the police officer. If you talk to people who've driven Sweet Hollow Road at night, you'll eventually hear about a very particular kind of traffic stop. The story usually goes like this. You're driving a little too fast through the hollow, maybe after midnight, maybe after some drinks. You see lights in the mirror and pull over. A uniformed officer walks up, asks for your license and registration, maybe gives you a warning, and starts to walk away. Only then do you notice the blood on the back of his shirt, and if he turns just enough in the mirror, you see that the back of his head is simply gone. According to legend, he was a real officer, killed in the line of duty on or near this road, shot in the head during a traffic stop. Now he's still out here working, stopping cars that drive too fast through the dark. As with so many of these tales, there is no clear match in the public record, no definite name, just fragments of different tragedies folded into a single enduring ghost. Mount Misery Road, winding up above Sweet Hollow, brings its own stories. People talk about strange lights floating between the trees, appearing and vanishing with no clear source. Others describe the feeling of being watched from the woods, of hearing voices when there's nobody else around, or of seeing a woman in white step out onto the gravel and then simply not be there when they pass. There are also tales of bodies dumped along the roadside, of a woman murdered and left near the tree line, of a hell dog with glowing eyes that appears by the shoulder and chases cars into the night. Those details echo similar stories from across the region, older European and American folklore replanted here in the Long Island woods. Whether you believe any of it or not, one thing is true. Mount Misery at night is dark. The road is narrow, the shoulders are shallow, and the trees feel very close. Behind all of this, there is the quieter reality of real history. Sweet Hollow is one of the older settled areas here. Along and near the road, you'll find the John Everett House, the M. Bayliss House, and the former Sweet Hollow Presbyterian Church Parsonage, early 19th century buildings now listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The cemetery beside the road holds generations of local families. It has also suffered vandalism from people chasing the legends. Headstones knocked over, fencing damaged, all in the name of a scare and a selfie. There have been accidents along these roads. There have been deaths in the surrounding area, car crashes, drownings, tragedies connected with the wider region's hospitals and institutions. And over time, all of that grief and anxiety has been woven together into a single, tangled knot of stories attached to these two little backroads in the West Hills. That tangle is what you feel when you drive them after dark. So, is Sweet Hollow Road actually haunted? Is Mount Misery? Maybe that depends on what you mean by haunted. If you're looking for documented, provable cases of ghosts, you won't find them in any official file. If you're looking for stories, for decades of whispered accounts from drivers, hikers, teenagers, and late-night thrill seekers, there are more than enough to fill books, podcasts, and low-budget horror films. What is certain is that these roads carry layers. Layers of local history, layers of real accident and loss, and layers of legend that say something about how people here think about danger, about death, and about the places on the edge of town where the streetlights thin out and the trees close in. If you ever decide to drive Sweet Hollow Road or Mount Misery Road yourself, do it with respect. Respect for the people who live here. Respect for the cemetery and the parkland. Respect for the real tragedies that gave these stories their weight. And above all, respect for the basics. Drive slowly, stay on the public road, and leave the fences, gates, and graves exactly as you found them. Because whether you believe in ghosts or not, one thing is very real. On a narrow, dark, wooded road in the middle of the night, the most dangerous thing out there is almost always another human being.